In April of 2014, two Dutch tourists named Kremers and Lisanne Froon went hiking in Panama and never returned. Months later, officials found their bleached bones and disturbing pictures that were left behind on their camera. On April 1st, 2014, Kremers and Lisanne Froon left their host family home to take the family's dog on a walk through the scenic forests around the Baru volcano in Boquete, Panama. Kremers and Froon were students from Amersfoort in the Netherlands. They had spent 6 months planning their trip to Panama, which was supposed to serve as part vacation, part service trip. They planned on spending some time hiking and touring while also volunteering with local children, teaching arts and crafts, and learning Spanish. The two women had been hiking around the Panamanian jungle for the past 2 weeks as part of a backpacking mission trip and intended to stay for the next 4 weeks with their host family to volunteer at a local school. However, after they waved goodbye to their family at 11 a.m. on April 1st, they were never seen again. The women had written a Facebook post in which they discussed their intentions to tour the local village. They also wrote that they had brunch with 2 fellow Dutchmen before embarking on their hike. On the night of April 1st, the host family noticed something was wrong. Their dog had returned safe and sound, but alone. The girls were nowhere to be found. The host family searched the area around their home, but decided to wait until the morning to alert the authorities. On April 2nd, Kremers and Froon missed an appointment with a local tour guide who was supposed to take them on a private walking tour of Boquete. This prompted the host family to alert authorities. The next morning, an aerial search of the forest was conducted as well as a search of the village and the lightly wooded area by the locals. By April 6, the 2 women were still missing. Fearing the worst, the families of Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon flew to Panama, bringing with them detectives from the Netherlands. Along with local police and dog units, they searched the forest for 10 days. Days turned into weeks, and after 10 weeks, there were still no signs of either Kremers or Froon. Then, as police were slowing their search efforts, a local woman turned in a blue backpack, claiming to have found it in a rice paddy along the banks of the river. Inside the backpack were 2 pairs of sunglasses, $83 in cash, Lisanne Froon's passport, a water bottle, and 2 bras. Also inside, most importantly, was Froon's camera and both of the women's cell phones. Police immediately investigated the camera and phones and came up with disturbing evidence. The phones had remained in service for almost 10 days after the woman disappeared. Over just 4 days, 77 separate attempts had been made to call the police, both via 112, the emergency number in the Netherlands, and 911, the emergency number in Panama. Using the call logs, police were able to come up with an outline of the time the girls spent missing in the forests. The first 2 emergency calls had been just hours after Kremers and Froon had begun their hike to the 112 emergency number. Due to the dense jungle, neither attempts went through. In fact, out of all 77 calls, only 1 managed to make contact, but broke up after just 2 seconds. Police also discovered that on April 6, several unsuccessful attempts were made to unlock Kremers' phone with an incorrect PIN number. It never received the correct number again. By April 11th, both phones were dead. Though the call log was disturbing, it was nothing compared to what was found on the camera. The first photos on the camera were taken the morning of April 1st, when the women had left for their hike. The photos showed Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon on a trail near the Continental Divide, though nothing about them led police to become suspicious. However, the second set of photos was worrisome. Taken in the dead of night between the hours of 1 and 4 a.m. on April 8th, the photos showed the girls' belongings spread out on rocks, plastic bags, and candy wrappers, oddly piled mounds of dirt, a mirror, and most concerning, the back of Kris Kremers' head with blood leaking from her temple. After investigating the area where the backpack had been found, police uncovered Kremers' clothing neatly folded along the edge of the river. 2 months later, in the same area, a pelvic bone and a foot still inside a boot were found. Soon after that, the bones of both women were discovered. Lisanne Froon's bones looked as if they decomposed naturally, as there were still bits of flesh attached to them. Kris Kremers' bones were stark white and looked as if they were bleached. Police questioned the locals, tour guides, and other hikers who had been in the area at the time, but nothing besides the photos and call logs provided them with evidence as to what had happened. There wasn't even enough evidence to determine the cause of death. To this day, the disappearance and deaths of Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon remain a harrowing mystery. Soon after appearing in Scarface, actress Tammy Lynn Leppert disappeared from Cocoa Beach, Florida on July 6, 1983, at the age of just 18. The young and beautiful Tammy Lynn Leppert was at the start of a promising modeling and acting career in the early 1980s. Blonde and hazel-eyed, she had first begun modeling in beauty pageants at the age of 4 and had taken home over 280 crowns. In 1983, she began appearing in movies. She is probably most recognizable for a small part as a female distraction in the movie Scarface, though she also appears as a boxing match participant in the film Spring Break. She was just 18 and wanted to continue her acting career by moving to Hollywood in 1983, but sadly those dreams were never realized. On the morning of July 6, 1983, she left her mother's home in Rockledge, Florida, and was never seen again. Just prior to her disappearance, her mother testified that she had been acting strangely and appeared to be under emotional distress. 4 days into shooting the film Scarface, she had returned back home and was behaving so erratically, her mother took her to the hospital to undergo a mental health evaluation. Tammy Lynn Leppert was kept under the doctor's care for 3 days before she was released with no evidence of drug or alcohol abuse or any indications of any other physical ailments. According to her mother, she seemed paranoid and nervous, refusing to eat or drink out of open containers, and constantly suspicious that somebody was out to hurt her. Most notably, on the morning she disappeared, she had not combed her hair before leaving the house, which her mother said was very out of character for her. She had gone out with an unidentified male friend who was the last person to see her alive. He reported that the two of them had gotten into an argument and he had dropped her off alone at a parking lot near an Exxon gas station off State Road A18 in Cocoa Beach, Florida. Tammy Lynn Leppert was last seen wearing a blue denim skirt and blue shirt with flower appliques, a gray purse, and sandals. Some accounts have stated that witnesses had seen her barefoot just before her disappearance, although these were never corroborated. There was also speculation that she may have been 3 months pregnant at the time of her disappearance. Leppert's mother claimed she was afraid of the male friend who had picked her up that day, and he should have been considered a suspect. However, the police claimed that he was not a viable suspect, and no charges were ever filed against him. The police investigation eventually brought them to a man named Christopher Wilder, known as the Beauty Queen Killer, who was responsible for the murders and disappearances of many young women throughout Florida area in the early to mid 1980s. He was known to lure his female victims into his home under the guise that they were auditioning for modeling gigs, a ruse which might have convinced Tammy Lynn Leppert, a known model, to follow him. Leppert's family originally filed a suit against Wilder, but eventually dropped the charges. Wilder was killed in 1984 during a shootout with the police, and the police were never able to confirm his involvement in Leppert's disappearance. John Brennan Crutchley, another convicted serial killer and rapist who was active in the area at the time, was also a suspect in the disappearance, but no evidence was ever found to link him to Leppert. Tammy Lynn Leppert's paranoia led her mother to believe that her disappearance was linked to something more sinister. She believed her daughter had gotten involved in a local drug and money laundering ring, and it was eventually targeted by the gang because she knew too much about their operation. However, these theories were also never able to be confirmed. Her mother died in 1995, and almost 35 years later, the mystery of Tammy Lynn Leppert's disappearance has never been solved. While studying nursing at UMass Amherst in February of 2004, Mora Murray crashed her car in rural New Hampshire, then, inexplicably, disappeared forever. At 7:27 p.m. on February 9, 2004, a woman named Faith Westman called the police in Haverhill, New Hampshire, to report a car accident on Route 112. A black Saturn appeared to be stuck in a ditch near her home. The dispatcher thanked her for calling and sent out an officer. By 7:42 p.m., authorities had received another phone call about the accident, this time from a bus driver named Butch Atwood. He reported that the driver was a young woman who appeared to be shaken up but unharmed. Atwood said that he had offered to call the cops at the scene of the crash, but the woman claimed that she had already called roadside assistance. Still, Atwood called the police anyway once he arrived home, about 100 yards away from the accident. He said that he could not see the woman's car from his house, but he did see other cars passing by on the road. At 7:46 p.m., the first responding officer had arrived on scene, but the mysterious young woman was nowhere to be found. After an initial search of the area, authorities learned that the missing woman was a 21-year-old named Mora Murray, a nursing student at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. She had left campus earlier that day without telling anyone that she was going to New Hampshire, and after Murray vanished in Haverhill that evening, she was never seen again. Born on May 4, 1982, in Brockton, Massachusetts, Mora Murray was raised in the nearby town of Hanson. The youngest daughter of Fred and Lori Murray, she saw her parents separate when she was just 6 years old. Mora Murray had 4 siblings, Fred Jr., Kathleen, Julie, and Curtis, and she was often described as an overachiever from a young age. In school, Murray made her mark as an honor student and a track athlete. She was accepted into West Point, though she ended up transferring to the University of Massachusetts in Amherst to study nursing. Her time there appeared normal for the most part, but there were some problems. 3 months before her disappearance, Mora Murray was arrested for using a stolen credit card number, but that charge was supposed to be dismissed as long as she maintained good behavior for 3 months. And on February 5th, 2004, Murray had an emotional phone conversation with her sister Kathleen, who was struggling with addiction and issues with her fiancé. At the time, Murray was at her campus security job and was so distraught by the call that she had to be escorted back to her dorm. When her supervisor tried to find out what was wrong, all Murray could say was this: "My sister." This was just 4 days before Murray vanished. Murray's father, Fred, traveled to Amherst on February 7th, 2004. He said that he went car shopping with his daughter and went to dinner with her before he went back to his motel. He then lent Murray his car so she could drive back to her dorm for a party that night. But on her way back in the wee hours of the next morning, she crashed her father's car into a guardrail. Though Murray was unharmed, the car was seriously damaged. However, Fred soon found out that his insurance would cover the cost of repairs as long as Murray picked up the proper forms from the Registry of Motor Vehicles. Aside from being upset over the accident, Murray reportedly seemed fine when her father took her back to the dorm later that day. But the next morning, on February 9th of 2004, everything changed. Murray emailed her professors to say that she would be taking a week off due to a death in the family. Her relatives later said that there was no death. She also emailed her boyfriend, Bill Rosh, a U.S. Army lieutenant in Oklahoma. She said, "I love you more, stud. I got your messages, but honestly, I didn't feel like talking to much of anyone. I promise to call today, though. Love you, Maura." Murray called the owner of a condo in Bartlett, New Hampshire, where she had stayed before with family, but she didn't reserve a room. She also called a booking hotline for hotels in Stowe, Vermont, but again did not reserve a room. By that point, she had also used the internet to look up directions to Burlington, Vermont. It's unclear what her planned destination was meant to be because she didn't tell anyone where she was going. Around 3:15 p.m., Murray drove to an off-campus ATM and withdrew $280. She then went to a liquor store and purchased about $40 worth of alcohol, including Bailey's, Kahlua, and boxed wine. She also stopped by the Registry of Motor Vehicles and picked up the forms for her car accident. At 4:37 p.m., she placed a call to her own voicemail. It was the last recorded instance that she ever used her phone. Little is known about Murray's whereabouts between her errands in Amherst and her car crash in Haverhill hours later, which likely happened at some point between 7 p.m. and 7:25 p.m. The 911 calls from Westman and Atwood, the two locals who reported the car accident, were placed at 7:27 p.m. and 7:42 p.m. respectively, and by 7:46 p.m., Maura had disappeared. The first officer on the scene found a damaged car, but no driver. The vehicle was locked and the airbags had been deployed. The cop who wrote up the report said, "Evidence at the scene indicated the vehicle had been eastbound and had gone off the roadway, struck some trees, spun around, and come to rest facing the wrong way in the eastbound lane." The officer continued, "In plain sight behind the driver's seat of the vehicle, I could see a box of Franzia wine. I could also see red liquid on the driver's side door and ceiling of the car. In addition, the cop discovered a Coke bottle that contained a red liquid with strong alcoholic odor, and there were also printed MapQuest directions to Burlington, Vermont. There were no obvious signs of foul play, and there were no footprints in the snow that led into the nearby woods. So the officer first asked Atwood, the last known person to speak with Murray, to give him a hand with the search. Eventually, a state trooper showed up, followed by firefighters and an emergency medical service. While they began combing the area west of the scene, it's believed that no one went east during the initial search. This was one of the many things that Murray's father, Fred, who was only informed about his missing daughter 24 hours after the crash, would criticize about how the police handled the search. "I knew she was headed east," Fred said. "She was headed to Bartlett. She was up there as an infant. I remember changing her diapers in a tent up there, for Christ's sakes." While Murray's phone records would indeed indicate that she was considering renting a room in Bartlett, the MapQuest directions in the car led police to believe that she was actually headed to Burlington instead. But since she told no one of her plans and left without making a confirmed reservation, it remains unclear where she was actually going. Police also believed that Murray may have been trying to kill herself, and even put out a press release 2 days after she first went missing that she was possibly suicidal. Her father has denied this suggestion. She was in good spirits and had no worries or reasons to run away from her life. However, it could not be ignored that Murray had been dealing with numerous problems prior to her disappearance, including her legal issues with credit card fraud, her worries over her alcoholic sister, and crashing her father's car mere hours before getting into yet another car accident. Though many of her loved ones believed that Murray had simply intended to get away from all the drama for just a few days, there were some signs that she intended her disappearance to be a permanent one. Most notably, a search of her dorm room revealed that she had packed up most of her belongings into boxes before she left. Atop one of the boxes was a printed email to her boyfriend which detailed problems in their relationship. While Murray had left some of her belongings in her car, a few key items were missing, including her cell phone and backpack. However, her phone was never used again. Any bank account associated with her has remained dormant, and ever since Mora Murray's disappearance in 2004, only alleged sightings, dead ends, and speculative theories have emerged. One of the earliest police theories about this befuddling missing person case was that Mora Murray had either planned to kill herself or had been consumed by suicidal thoughts after her final car accident. But many of her loved ones have firmly insisted that she would have never ended her own life, even with all the incidents that had happened in the preceding days. Personal feelings aside, some of the items that Murray had packed in her car, such as birth control pills, tooth whitener, and college textbooks, have led many to believe that she was not intending to die that day. After all, why would a suicidal person bother packing items like those? Another theory was that Murray had simply panicked after crashing her car just hours after damaging her father's vehicle and had escaped the area to avoid getting into trouble. Considering the amount of alcohol found at the scene and the Coke bottle that was likely filled with alcohol, authorities believed that Murray had been drinking and didn't want to risk jeopardizing her record of good behavior after her credit card fraud arrest. The nearby woods might have hypothetically been a good place to hide out if the weather had been warm, but it was rather cold outside, and there were no footprints found in the snow leading to the woods, meaning that she would have had to escape on the road, likely moving east of the accident scene, since that area was not inspected during the first search. Interestingly enough, a contractor who who had been passing by on Route 112 that night, later reported seeing a young person moving eastbound on foot a few miles away from the scene of the accident around 8 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. However, the contractor didn't report the alleged sighting until months later because he was unsure at first about the exact date he had seen the person. It's still unclear whether that person was actually Murray. Assuming that Murray did not kill herself and did not succumb to the elements while in hiding, where would she have gone? Some have speculated that she started a new life for herself, perhaps even in Canada, to escape her legal issues and the drama that was unfolding in her personal life. While authorities have acknowledged the possibility that Murray is still out there somewhere, they think it's extremely unlikely. Though some have stuck to the suicide or accidental death theories, others think that she was abducted. Her father, Fred, firmly believes that she was, quote-unquote, taken by a local dirtbag. However, many residents of Haverhill have scoffed at the idea that it was a local person who did it, and suggest that Murray was simply at the wrong place at the wrong time, and that a random kidnapper just happened to be on the road that day. In the years since Mora Murray went missing, amateur sleuths have explored all of these ideas and more. For instance, Murray's boyfriend Rosh has been accused of sexual misconduct against other women, leading some to question whether he played a role in what happened to Murray. However, Rosh was in Oklahoma at the time of the disappearance. Other theories have focused on Atwood, the last known person to see Murray alive. Some found it suspicious that he did not stay with Murray until help arrived. Also, he and his wife moved to Florida shortly after the disappearance. Perhaps most shockingly, some citizen sleuths have implied that Murray's father may have been abusive toward her, perhaps prompting her to run away, an accusation that Murray's loved ones have denied. But for all the theories, we are no closer to finding out what happened to Mora Murray today than we are nearly 2 decades ago. Considering her slim chances of survival, there have been multiple efforts to recover her remains near the scene of the accident, but these have all led to dead ends. Most recently, in September of 2021, New Hampshire State Police announced that human bone fragments had been found just 25 miles away from North Haverhill in the Loon Mountain area. However, radiocarbon dating in November revealed that the remains were far older than Murray. My heart is heavy upon learning that these remains do not belong to my little sister, Murray's sister Julie said in a statement. I urge the NHSP to work tirelessly until the remains can be identified so that peace may be given to their loved ones. My family will continue to search for Maura and will leave no stone unturned until we bring her home and hold accountable those who are responsible for her disappearance.